Palm Sunday, and we remember Jesus' entry into Jerusalem through the gates. For years and for decades, we've marched about in churches like this, waving our palms, particularly when we had a bunch of children who could join in the fun. Now, for a second year, the pandemic has disrupted, rained on our parade. Marie's coordinated so you can have some cross or palm frond at home to wave as you watch the YouTube or wave on the Zoom call, but it's not the same, is it? All of our rituals, like meetings, like small group learning, have been flattened onto a Zoom screen, or perhaps haven't happened at all. And when we do start up again, will it be half on site and half on screen? After a year of pandemic, it's more than just the choreography of church life that's changed. It's the big parades, the big protests that have been disrupted. Some protests tried to bubble up, Black Lives Matter or the riots at the U.S. Capitol, but generally, we're remembering and we're anticipating the choreography, the dance of parades and protests, of pride and humbling. And what's it like for you to anticipate? Exciting or anxious? Fun or fearful? We're planning to sneak outdoors for a soft launch of outdoor worship on Good Friday, and then again on Easter sunrise. Join us and try it and find out if it's exciting and anxious, or fun or fearful. As we wake up our corporate bodies, small and large, from our medically induced coma of pandemic lockdown, what'll it be like? So I'm inviting you to play your mental movie of Jesus' entry into Jerusalem. Is it triumphal with Jesus as a rock star, or is it revolutionary, Jesus as the insurrectionist, the insurgents, again the government, whether it's the Romans or the priests? You see, those have been our choices. We can either be a Constantinian church. Jesus is the reason for the season. He blesses every parade. Or we can be a Protestant social justice movement speaking truth to power in protest movements. What business are we in, and how's business? Protests can appropriate religious symbols of identity and tradition. It's not an easy split from parades being the political celebrations of a dominant culture to protests being the expressions of minority cultures. Whether it's the Rohingya or the Uyghur Muslims or the Tibetan Buddhists, we're replaying the story of voices that need to be heard, people that need to be seen. And political parades celebrating majority rule only give us the illusion of unity. There's always something bubbling. Differences amongst us or between us that need to be policed, negotiated. Are you inspired? Does it express your collective identity when you go through the small rituals of church or community, or the big rituals of parades and protests? Or is it a matter of anxiety to you when we express the we things and risk the differences? Parades and protests, politics and religion, what business are we in? Either, neither, or both? As a congregation, as a denomination, as a Christian movement. So I invite you to play your movie and try editing it a little bit. Jesus entered Jerusalem's gates, part of a flood of festival pilgrims. They were all coming for Passover. They weren't there for Jesus. Jesus is the only one coming to die and knowing it. His disciples cast branches and cloaks before an untrained colt. He's not a warrior in a chariot or on a steed. He's just a guy on a baby, untrained beast of burden. It's a parody of Roman triumphs. It's a bit of a challenge to the priestly authorities, alluding to a messianic claim, but really, it's a clown act in my mental movie. It's more like Shriners in one of those kiddie cars, or clowns throwing candies around in the middle of a parade, or those half-naked fellas on the Pride parade with water guns shooting at the police and shooting at the politicians. It's a clown act of subversion and parody of both political and religious pretensions. We might do with remembering that kind of a entry to Jerusalem today. Dominant cultures like winners, and they'd like Jesus to be one of them. Marginalized groups know other roles, and they'd like to claim Jesus. Consciousness, what side of the fence are you on? Analysis, who's there with you? What's a God's eye view? As we emerge from this medically induced coma collectively, our bodies will gather in parades and protests. Differences will appear between, among, and around us. What's that going to be like? There's going to be some grumpy people. I might be one of them. As we realize the tensions when reasonable and faithful people may differ and some voices drown out others, is it time to take a risk to save a life? The little parades and the big ones, the little protests and the big ones, we're practicing Christians, seeking something with Jesus as our model. I'm proposing to you that Jesus might be a clown in the parade. There's something scary and disturbing. There's something inspiring and exciting about to happen this spring, this summer. Will we have eyes to see? Will we have courage to step into the dance of pride and humility? Thomas Berrigan, the old anti-Vietnam Jesuit protester, who started the Plowshares organization about converting nuclear weapons, who was an activist for AIDS sufferers long before it was popular, who died about 5 years ago, wrote this: being a Christian needs redefining in every age, and every age hesitates between two great choices: that of insecurity in the world, and that of a security that merely draws on what has gone before and remains on solid ground. The real effort, never really done with, is to discern what Christ is saying to us in the real world. All else is a mortician's job or a child's game. And that took Berrigan to a lot of protests and gave him very few parades. Martin Buber, I quoted him to you before, a Jewish fellow 100 years ago, was getting tenure in a German university as a brilliant scholar, but spent the second half of his life as a refugee from home because he was Jewish. He writes, "Every morning I shall concern myself anew about the boundary between the love deed, yes, and the power deed, no. And pressing forward, honor reality. We cannot avoid using power, cannot escape the compulsion to afflict the world, so let us, cautious in diction and mighty in contradiction, love powerfully. Parades and protests, politics and religion, reasonable and faithful people may differ. We'll be needing some clowns to get through all this, to negotiate our differences and keep an eye on representing what's truly human and what's truly divine. May we be part of that in this season. Amen.